Hey everybody, it's Zach Coffin, the Vice President of the Higher Ed Marketer, and we're so excited for this Faith Leaders series. We recorded these episodes at the CCCU International Forum this year in Dallas, Texas. We've got some incredible leaders for you to hear from, and we're so excited that you would tune in. And so please enjoy these episodes that we recorded live at CCCU.
You're listening to the Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. I'm Bart Caylor. We're here live at the CCCU International Forum. We're at the Gaylord at Dallas, Texas and Grapevine. And I've got Jason Cook here today. He is the Vice President for Marketing and Comms at Chief Marketing Officer at Baylor University. And so just down the road in Waco. So Jason, good to have you.
You bet. It's great to be here. And thank goodness I didn't have to get on an airplane to get here too these days.
Took me a little while to get here with the airplane and the storm, but really grateful to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit about branding. And I know that that's something that you guys have been doing a lot with, and you think a lot about that, which I really appreciate. And so one of the things I want to think about is talking about brand experiences. That's what I'm interested in talking about first. And how do you kind of do that through your alumni? Because alumni are really the social proof that a lot of times prospective students, families, even donors are kind of looking at the lens of the university brand in through those alumni. So tell me a little bit about how do your alumni shape the way prospective students are perceiving the Baylor brand?
Yeah, you started off with a really intense, great question there, Bart.
Let's get right to it.
Yeah, you bet. I think there's a combination to look at is we know that Gen Z is all about authenticity.
Yeah.
That's part about it. And things are being real. Mm-hmm. And then we also know that parents, whether they're older millennials or Gen X parents of students and prospective students, they're really looking at that return on investment, the outcomes component. So you marry those two together, authenticity and outcomes, and that really points you to your alumni.
Yeah,
the proof's in the pudding.
Exactly.
And for us as marketers and as storytellers, there's just a treasure trove of outcomes and people, real people who have gone to our institutions and are doing great things. And in our world as a faith-based institution, being able to look at how our alumni are serving others and making an impact in communities and around the world is really powerful. Right. And a lot of institutions, you may have business owners, you may have teachers, you may have CEOs at large companies, you may have people in government, just a whole wide range of graduates that we have. And so it's just incredible stories. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the challenges that we have that we put upon ourselves as higher ed marketers is we have to think that those stories have to be the Fortune 500 CEO. Right. And that's not the case. Other students in our schools, they have different aspirations as part of that. And I think what we have to do is make sure we get those stories, a wide range of that align with our academic offerings and degrees and different types of experiences, and tell those in a way that really reflect our brand and what we're about.
That's great. And I know we've got a lot of different size schools that listen. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear from your perspective, because certainly you have a much larger alumni base than a lot of the schools that might be listening. Mm-hmm. How are you activating those alumni? I mean, how are you kind of, finding the stories? Because, a lot of times you can call the alumni office, but they don't know as much as the affinity groups do, like the different departments on campus. Yeah. How do you go about harvesting all that and activating the alumni?
That's a great question. And there's not one way as part of that. I think one of the great things about it is Google's a wonderful thing, to try to look at what our alumni are doing. So our social media team is very active of scouring information information. And the great thing about our institution at Baylor, our alumni are very proud of our institution. So usually, somehow, if they're talking about something they're doing, Baylor's always connected to that. So I would look at what's your social footprint, what's your digital monitoring looking at, have great connections with our president. She's out on the road a lot, and she gets lots of stories and meet alumni around the country. She is so fabulous of, hey, Jason, I met this really fascinating person. You may want to reach out to them.
That's awesome.
Have great relationships with the deans at your colleges and schools, because they have a little bit closer connection to students and graduates there. So I don't think that there's any one way to do it, but I think it's just having an intentional effort that we've got to mine these alumni stories. And then also, Bart, make sure that we are telling those alumni stories in a way that prospective students will actually relate to that.
Yeah, I like that. And I want to point out that your use of intentionality. I think that's so important, because I think many times as marketers, we kind of get used to the grind and we just do things and we're not as intentional as we need to be sometimes, or we don't push our teams to be as intentional. And the other thing I like about what you said there too is the fact that you've got to get the stories that are going to connect with the prospective students. And so my next question kind of goes along that line of, how do you balance nostalgia? Because everybody wants to kind of look back and talk about, this was my time, or maybe their story goes around their time at campus, while being forward looking for the prospective student.
One of the wild things about higher education, I've been in the business, 25 years now, and alumni think that the institution, your university, is the same as it was when they walked across the stage at graduation. That the university just should be the same. It just hasn't changed whatsoever. So you've got that component of nostalgia that our institutions are moving so fast, but our alumni think it's exactly where it was. And then you also have prospective students. Nostalgia is a really big thing right now.
Yeah.
One of my favorite brands is Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. And so their new rebrand is going towards nostalgia. And you can collect these 4 nostalgic cups, and I've got to have them as part of that. But I don't know if it's the thing about the 90s. I don't know why people or young kids are so nostalgic about the 90s.
Yeah, I lived through the 90s.
Yeah, I don't want to do it again. But I think that that's really where the art of our business comes in, is how can we tie into the nostalgia of alums and make that a nostalgia where it's relevant and cool for today. And I think a lot of it is looking at different types of formats for storytelling and telling alumni stories in snackable pieces.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that quintessential 2,000, 3,000 word alumni profile in an alumni magazine.
And the young students aren't going to read that.
They're not going to. And frankly, I don't know if a lot of our alumni read it either.
I'm not sure if they do.
Exactly, because our attention spans and worlds have changed.
Yeah.
But there are opportunities to bridge that gap and tell our stories in real, relevant ways. And college is all about nostalgia at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, one of the things, too, I think that nostalgia does, and some of the things that you're doing with the brand, is also you have to have that differentiation. One of the things I talk a lot to my clients about, and I've written about it in my 2 books, is just the uniqueness and the differentiation that your school has. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. How do you do that brand differentiation versus kind of that rankings-driven sameness that I think a lot of people struggle with? And so why do you think rankings tend to push institutions toward this idea of brand being homogenous with everybody else? It's just, I mean, I can look at the taglines and you can cover up the logo, and you can say I can name 6 schools that can fit that.
No, you're exactly right. And here being at the CCCU conference, people like to wear their logos, which is great, their brands. And I walk by and look at people and try to say, okay, what do I know about that institution? Mm-hmm. Why do I know this? Where have I seen it? And things of that nature. And the higher ed, we're getting so much better at marketing. And we're not where we need to be, but it is kind of this, we follow the flock. We're a bunch of sheep as part of that. And, if you look at peer institutions, aspirant institutions, and you say, well, if we can be like this aspirant institution, then we will, or groups of institutions, then that will allow us to rise up in the rankings as part of that. And I think higher ed has done itself such a disservice because we've done that, and you shed all the uniqueness.
Exactly.
You shed the distinctiveness of your institutions. You shed that thing of choice as part of that. And so I think that we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the marketplace, that people are understanding that differentiation is important. And I think a lot of it deals with the higher education cliff that is becoming real. I think that this is the first year that we're really feeling it across this sector. And then also, I think that the competition for just highly qualified, competitive students is becoming even greater as the market shifts in and of itself. So I think that people are starting to recognize that we need to take some corporate branding principles into our business. Differentiation is important. We've got to make sure we understand our brand, our brand proposition as part of that. And there's a lot of things to unpack at this, but I think what you're also seeing is that your communications marketing, your chief marketing officers are getting a seat at the table with leadership teams, and we're able to bring these principles, long-standing Marcon principles, into the equation, and that's really going to prove very valuable for institutions.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the marketing maturity that I think a lot of institutions have to go through. I mean, some of the institutions are kind of primed that are already there that can grow into that. I know a lot of other institutions that smaller ones sometimes struggle with articulating their brand so that they can know exactly who that mission fit student is and market directly to them rather than just the masses.
Right.
And I think that's so challenging sometimes. So what do you think that differentiation, and I guess more question I have is, how does Baylor navigate this tension between the visibility and the distinctiveness? Because I mean, you've got a D1, athletics. You're in a different place than a lot of other schools that might be here, but at the same time, you've got to navigate that differentiation versus your brand distinctiveness.
Yeah, it's we're kind of I always say that we're kind of like the three bears. We're like stuck in the middle. Yeah. And we're not the smallest bear. We're not the biggest bear. We're kind of in the middle bear. But then we also, we are a faith-based institution. But if you look at a lot of our, where we get our students, we're competing against big publics and great institutions here in the state of Texas. So for us, that brand proposition is very important. So, our formula that we have is like, look, our foundation is our Christian mission. That's always going to be important to us. Then we add that we are a Research One institution, which signifies a high productivity, academic excellence there. Then that mid-size comes into play because we're not like a Texas A&M with 70,000 students, but we're not like some of our smaller Christian schools that are here with 1,500, 2,000 students. So we're kind of in the middle, and then the athletics component, playing in a Power 4 conference in the Big 12. You add those together and you start thinking from a faith-based perspective, particularly as a Protestant institution, we're kind of one of one. Yeah. Notre Dame has those four pieces. I think BYU has those four pieces, but we really lean into that complete formula. We talk about it with our board. We talk about it certainly across our President's Council with our deans, and making sure that our leadership understands that these factors in the equation all play together to make us who we are. And sometimes you look at our marketing presentations and campaigns, things of that nature. We may turn the knobs a little bit on certain numbers of those components, depending on the audience and what we're trying to do. But having a clear formula of what your brand is, I think, is very valuable, and it kind of keeps you steady in how you move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That I think even as people are listening to this or watching this, anybody can do that. I mean, you don't have to be an R1 and a D1. You can just figure out where are our core brand pillars, and how do we communicate those, and how do we twist the dials? I mean, you can be a school of 1,500 people and do that. That's basic marketing. That's basically how you can do that.
Most certainly.
So let's talk about Waco for a second. I mentioned that earlier, and I know that you guys have been working on repositioning Waco, kind of the culture, the entertainment, the brand perception of that area. Because a lot of schools, I'll hear, "Hey, we're here. We're in this rural area. How do we market? We can't get anybody to come here." I really am a big believer that you've got to grow where you're planted. Yeah. And sometimes you, as the institution, can influence that area. So tell me a little bit about what role does cultural life in Waco play in shaping Baylor's brand identity, or how maybe does Baylor's brand identity shape Waco?
Yeah, really, really good question, and something we work hard at. And when I came to Baylor in December 2016, we were coming off a huge issues related to sexual assault.
Yeah.
That's part of that on our campus, and it's hard to believe that's been a decade ago now. But when I came in, I didn't know exactly what the impacts of that were on the brand. So we started significant research. Before we started any kind of marketing, I said, I need to know fundamentally, where is my brand at as part of that? And we've done that research. We're about to go into the field again this spring. So I've got longitudinal data for 9-10 years now, which is just incredible. And that's really what we used to build the brand as part of that. But one thing that started showing up in our research a couple of years ago was people were having questions about Waco, our hometown, and Waco is equidistance between Austin and Dallas, and we have a lot of social needs in our community, and people coming in to Waco were commenting on that, sensing that, and then also looking at how can we bring more activity to the city from an economic development standpoint. So we've been working hand in hand with the city, our chambers of commerce, and how can we all come together to really capture what Chip and Joanna Gaines have done with Fixer Upper and the Magnolia Silos. How do we partner with them? And we have really started to create so much energy in Waco where people are coming here. We've partnered with the city of Waco for a new basketball pavilion that we opened a couple of years ago. And as part of that, all of a sudden I'm in the concert business, which is absolutely wild.
You're a promoter now.
Yeah, I'm a concert promoter. I'll give you a link to sell some tickets in a little bit.
I will put that in the notes.
But we have found live entertainment is something that signifies for our community that there's energy, there's excitement, there's things to do here in Waco, and it has created such a sense of pride as part of that. And again, you don't have to be in a large city to do these things, and you don't have to have huge budgets to do these things. And what there's going to be musical acts that I will never get here because they're going to go to Dallas or Austin, but trying to find that fit in our community has just responded in a wonderful way. And going back, university brings people together, generates excitement in community, and so to some degree, it's just been a reinforcement of our role of what we need to do.
That's great, and I love the fact that you pointed out that you can do that at any size institution you're at. I mean, every school has a community. It doesn't matter if you're a small town of 300 people or a large urban area. You have influence in that area, and I love how you pointed that out. That's what a great lesson for everyone. So we're going to wrap this up, and one of the questions I always ask is if a higher ed marketer that's listening to this wants to reach out to you and ask a follow-up question, what's the best way to do that?
Please do. And, I'm getting a little bit older in age, so I'm not as active on X and Instagram as I was in the past. I'm still an emailer, but Jason_Cook, that's COOK at Baylor.edu.
Okay.
Please do it. And I think that's one of the joys of working in higher education education is that there is a sprint, the spirit of collaboration. There is a higher calling that we're all about, is to impact future generations. And I would love to visit with people. And I actually structure my calendar to where I typically leave my Fridays open.
Okay, good.
That gives me time for strategic thinking. And as we're looking, but it also gives me an opportunity to contact with peers and mentors that I still have. And so Fridays are always good days I try to set aside just to do that one thing.
Great. Well, if you're listening, be sure to email Jason on Thursday so he can look at it on Friday.
That's how it works. You bet.
Great. Well, Jason, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. You bet.
This is great.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com, your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.